that is information that is considered controlled, unclassified information.
The principals that would have been on that would have been individuals capable of approving that for public release.
I got 20 seconds. The deliberation as to whether or not we should launch a strike on another country, would you consider that classified information, Ms. Gabbard?
The information was not classified.
I'm not talking about this. I'm just talking about deliberation from principals as to whether or not we should launch a strike on another country. Would you consider that classified information? I'm not talking about what happened this week.
There are other factors that would go into determining that classification.
Mr. Ratcliffe, the deliberation between principals in our national security apparatus about whether or not to strike another country, would you consider that to be classified information?
Pre-decisional strike deliberation should be conducted through classified channels.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I may, I just want to return, Mr. Ratcliffe, to your answer there in part. Senator Kelly, it's been raised in several occasions now in this hearing about whether classified information was discussed in this chat. And you mentioned about the Secretary of Defense being what you called, I think, the original classification authority.
Right.
Correct. I think it's important for the public to understand that although you and Director Gabbard are original classification authorities on many matters, you're not that for all matters that might be classified in the government. Is that right?
That's correct.
So if the Secretary of State has classified sensitive diplomatic details, that's his authority. If the Secretary of Energy has sensitive classified information about our national laboratories, that's his authority. And the two of you can't speak to other departments who have their own original classification authority, which of course, as Director Gabbard said, ultimately rests with one person, the President of the United States. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. It looks like the Vice Chairman wants to weigh in as well.
Just very briefly. I mean, I think it strains the audience and the watching public's credibility if we're talking about timing, packages, that somehow this would be okay to put out. Or just, frankly, senior American officials trashing Europe. I've been around this for a while. This is not information you generally put out. And the notion there's not even an acknowledgement of, hey, gosh, we screwed up, is stunning to me. And the idea somehow, well, none of this was classified, but we can't talk about it here. You can't have it both ways.
I think the witness's point is they can't speak for every official in the government who has original classification authority.
Sure, I don't. That's not
So,
I'm not trying to.
if we want to get sober with advanced intelligence, this will cross-reference inevitably in the future with quote-unquote the declassified to classified program of whatever Trump is calling the Stargate AI. So if we want to get sober with the advanced intelligence, we're going to use the classification of Stargate AI and whatever it's changing capabilities of. We're going to use that to solve whatever the fuck they're trying to solve, respectively. Because whatever they're trying to solve, they're using it within their agency intelligence and their natural intelligence and artificial intelligence or whatever. So obviously, whatever, obviously just let the intelligence do what it's going to do and don't classify everything, obviously, So there's like,
Community classified information. Is that correct? That's correct.
so don't classify everything.
Yes, sure.
So like, if you want to get sober with the advanced intelligence, the headline is for this whole discussion, don't classify everything, need to know basis, 2012 fucking advanced intelligence. And everything they're talking about, the quote unquote spiritual intelligence, end quote unquote, because it's how we're having a new perception and a new approach and usage of quote unquote spiritual intelligence, end quote, an intelligence that's just dealing with other phenomena that low-key intersects with what they're talking about, right? But I don't want to like confuse anybody with spiritual intelligence. Like, what does that mean, end quote? It's a different vantage point of intelligence. And that different vantage point of intelligence is facilitating the shit that you could get to know that is vital. It's a different type of vitality, you know, vitality being the yin to a higher spiritual yang of vitalness, needing certain information and knowing what to classify, right? Because not obviously that's the learning process right here. We're not supposed to classify everything, right? And we're using a quote unquote AI end quote, and however we're educating ourselves and updating ourselves on what Stargate AI is, and then we're using spiritual intelligence to for some type of essence of evolution, right? It's an essence of evolution. We're working with things. We're co-inhabiting with different things so we could propel and progress. Because whatever they're fucking asking, there's a different spiritual intelligence that blows it out of the water because the predecessors have given us the gifts of the quote unquote, the higher dimensions, end quote. And what does that mean? There's a different operating system. And there's a different future that different beings, and even including you in your dream time, are having a new access to communicate with your dreams of the future. And the future, there's like I said in the past fucking podcast, there's on an energetic level, there's only quote unquote 2 timelines, end quote. There's the ascending timeline and there's the descending timeline. So we're working with some type of quote unquote positive future, end quote, so we can excel, and people are exploiting the positive energy from the positive future and using that energy still within the archetypes of the genetics. They're using that in just an out of pocket way, because everything they're talking about in a different future to different higher dimensional beings, it's like respectively, it's like we're growing up. There's a process of growing up within the soul to the passing of the different lives.
President Trump is
because everything they're saying, it's like, I don't know, dude. It's like I just feel like there's a strand within the system that's outdated, respectively. And if you can't feel that, then boy, oh boy, without teachers, without guiders, what would a classroom full of kids be without their teacher? Just on a different metaphor.
Russia has the battlefield advantage.
And start this from the beginning.
Forward slowly. I want to comment on that, however, to say that with regard to the Ukrainian resistance, the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian military have been underestimated for a period of several years now. And ultimately, I'm convinced from my reflections in observing from an intelligence standpoint that they will fight with their bare hands if they have to, if they don't have terms that are acceptable to an enduring peace. Obviously, to the point of maximalist goals, President Trump has communicated that he is aware of the dangers of that, of Russia getting what they want. And I think that the peace talks that are taking place would reflect, if successful, and they are making progress, that both sides would not get everything that they want.
And shout out to just general editing, highlighting, right?
In the short time I have, I'm
You know, like, yeah, like, exactly. Like, we have the technology and the innovation to highlight stuff, right? Quote unquote, some type of sophistication of content editing. What does that mean? Quote unquote sophistication, end quote, not to use it in a fraudulent aspect.
want to make certain that you do not foresee
A sophisticated content editing, it quote unquote, end quote, is just highlighting what we need to know, getting to the point, pretty much, right? So there's this conjecture, or there's this junction or there's this principle of getting to the point, respectively. So now that we can remind ourselves of that fresh little tidbit insight, get to the point, then we can move on to whatever is kind of like, it's more like things could be learned more easily. That's what I'm saying. Things could be learned more easily. And this is my own private sphere. And this is quote unquote America, end quote, where the freedom of speech principality is active. So the principles are active differently here, regardless of the race game. The country's dynamics and the citizens' dynamics, we're playing with the enhanced freedom of speech. We grew up with that. That's our like nindo in Japanese, the way of life, right? If I'm not mistaken, Japanese nindo, the way of life. That's our nindo. It's so the nindo is, what is your nindo? What is your way of life? And that's the thing with the complex thing of a bunch of diverse countries. It's like there's an experiment from different beings that are having diversified nindos, diversified ways of life, and we're going to see the beauty of how we can agree and disagree. Spirits that are disagreeables, spirits that are agreeables, that are quote unquote infecting themselves and influencing and convincing themselves within different nations on how to be within your way of life. But you don't even know your way of life because we're plastered on with polarized Saturn stuff, artificial stuff, Saturn stuff being mechanical, technical stuff, the mechanics of like just the nitty gritty mechanics of different types of mechanics, like the nitty gritty mechanical nature. Like the field of the mechanics, the hard mechanics is like that Saturn stuff. So the Saturn stuff isn't just robotics, but it's a channel though. So we're like, we can't just be polarized with just ignorant Saturn stuff. But if you are, that's like there's a grace. There's a grace here. There's a grace period, yin and yang. There's grace right now. We get to receive gifts to do shit. And then there's a yin grace period. We have time. We have time to do shit. We have time to still, quote unquote, make America the best, end quote. And I say quotes because it doesn't have to be like that way, you know. But if people want to play that competition game, then why sabotage and spoil that chance, you know? So it's like, so on a neutral level, the quote unquote, the intelligence of this country, end quote, has a very unique chance. Go for it, Tulsi.
I'm sure we'll share the results with the committee.
What is under review? It's a very simple question. Your private phone or officially issued phone? What could be under review?
National Security Council is reviewing all aspects of how this came to be, how the journalist was inadvertently added to the group chat, and what occurred within that chat across the board.
But so you're not going to disclose anything about whether you use the phone. Director Radcliffe, there's been indication that the CIA has warned recently retired personnel about the vulnerabilities of Signal and other encrypted messaging applications. If that's the case, why were you discussing these issues on Signal?
Like all the tech CEOs, they know they're fucking around with spiritual intelligence, whether they want to admit it or not, whether they're stupid to that shit or not, or unconscious. There's a difference between stupid and unconscious. Unconscious is your genetic physical body just doesn't know. Ignorance paraded with fog. That's the unconscious. The stupid is you're working with the unconscious to go away from the intelligence. So I'm naturally saying this stuff. I'm not trying to condescend anybody. This is the science of it, the metaphysical science of like the difference between unconscious and just dumb, like for real. So why would I bring that up, you know? I would have to rewind this.
But you have no way to verify that. I don't.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the point I was talking about was the channel of tech CEOs. They know they're working with low-key, quote unquote, spiritual predecessors, end quote, different beings of intelligence that have raised themselves up to have a different spiritual age span, and that living phenomena from a higher dimension. Everything that they're drawing from, even the materials, it's all being facilitated and processed and processed by different intelligences without a doubt, because we are reflecting that and we're drawing from that energy on how to get life and energy. So there's a channel where the tech CEOs, whether they're stupid or unconscious, they're working with quote unquote esoteric predecessors, end quote, of intelligence. And how they're doing that is their whole shit and new way of life is reflecting a higher way of doing it that's coming from a different place. So as that's coming from a different place, all of the tech CEOs in quote unquote generally, they're reciprocating on a low-key level and exchanging energy on a low-key level with a different spiritual beacon, whether they want to admit it or not. And as they're doing that, they're exchanging energies, and inevitably they're gonna have to like just fucking be fucking transparent, honest, and admit how they're getting their fucking energy, right? So how you're getting your fucking energy, then that's what you have to pay for. So if you want to do some real balanced Saturn shit, then and some real other balanced Venus shit and balanced order bigger picture shit, then pay off your debt on the bigger picture level. And that goes for naturally everybody. And the quote unquote God, the highest being, end quote, is managing all of that, because there's an intelligence that's managing all of that, and we're denominations of that. So with the collective intelligence and evidence, in the future, we can prove quote unquote God, end quote, exists. And that's the thing. Our unconscious wants to dish it out, and our ignorance wants to dish it out. And we want to have this curtain of just the play of 3D to 5D and just like kind of suppress that just for whatever toxic, selfish reason. And why do I bring that up? The tech CEOs need spiritual intelligence, because how their last hope for changing and adapting and evolving needs that. Where for whatever reason the humans are just playing curtain game. They're just like they're like too many facades. It's like life is like a metaphorical Halloween, and I was born near Halloween, and this is for real though. Like this is a metaphorical Halloween, and for me to naturally say it like that, that's a fucking miracle. It's a miracle. Why is it a miracle? Because that's what's going on. That's what's going on, guys? What's going on? Like why are we dismissing other easy solutions? Like what's going on a natural level? Like, are we denying the Constitution and shit? Start this from the beginning.
First, or Gaza ceasefire falls apart, and we don't get to start this on our own terms. Your testimonies you don't recall.
And obviously, like, go back into the state of listening. Obviously,
I recall there being
quote unquote the meditation can help you build up something in your mind, some new brain material, brain matter, brain tissue on an esoteric level, and the meditation could build up something of like quote unquote a gray matter, end quote, and shout out to just like 2012 to 2016 science articles or whatever, because obviously they've done their work. Meditation could store you up so you could fucking listen more. Excuse my. And if everyone if we could be so dry to just say like, where's your head at? But like, I'm not trying to condescend anybody, but if we could be so dry, but like, he's not that dry because he's keeping the show like going. Shout out to that strong communication from Mr. Reed or whatever. But we all have, for us to put the for us to put our head in the game, guess what we have to do first? Guess. We have to practice listening, because without the listening, then there's not a free-flowing understanding or comprehension. There's not an in and out to the communication itself. So if you want to start this presentation over tomorrow and get the basics down and just know what the fuck to do and finally understand, and you finally get the realization of how America stands off of principles of their citizens have been growing up off of freedom of speech and real liberation on some esoteric to surface level shit, then you could finally, then the realization could finally hit you like, oh, America got set up for a reason with freedom of speech. Oh, people have been doing their work. Oh, we've influenced each other for this long. Oh, now we got some better intelligence than China, maybe, or not naturally, perhaps, to some probability. If we just fucking recognize the teamwork and the principles of how the nation has been putting in its own work since the 1700s and pre, but it's not even about, and then a higher realization, it's not about nation versus nation. It's about your subjective relationship with quote unquote the higher beings of original God, end quote. Why? Because they're the fucking ultimate controllers of this shit. And we have to look past the biased racism of just nation to nation, but we can go into that channel of competition, but we don't have to. You know what I'm saying? So like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, why are we projecting? Why are we assuming? Why are we fucking focusing on petty ass shit? Like, where's your head at? We have advanced intelligence to fucking know what the answer is to your fucking questions. Yes, feel that shit. Pause with that shit. Yes, what this the emotional intelligence has been like this since 2012. 12, 13, and 14. China has these algorithms on lock.
I thank the witnesses again for their appearance today.
We don't know what new algorithms China has, but maybe we do if we just work with the original higher dimensions.
What you're saying didn't make sense.
So what are you guys doing?
Every knows, at least directly, if you had the courtesy of acknowledging you were on the chain.
The floor is yours, Mr. Reed.
Wouldn't even touch that, even though we've got our initials. And if we want a comparison, think back to the beginning of the Ukraine war, when
Okay, that was like what, 2.5 years ago?
concert with our then ally
2022.
declassified a lot of Putin's battle plans that allowed the Ukrainians to push back successfully on the Russian invasion. How was that? That was gone through a real process of declassification. As Senator Ossoff so clearly made the point. This information out, potentially where our adversary could reposition its defenses in the unwillingness of the individuals on this
12.
panel who are on the chat to even apologize for acknowledging
12.
what a colossal screw up this is
12.
speaks volumes.
12.
Thank you to our witnesses for your appearance. A few administrative matters. As
12.
I mentioned earlier, Senator Collins is under the weather. She regrets that she could not be here for your testimony. Senator Risch, likewise, had to preside over a hearing of the Foreign Relations Committee to include the nomination of my former governor, Mike Huckabee, a great American and a great friend of Israel, to be the next ambassador to Israel. He also regrets that he could not be here. I anticipate he may have written questions as well. I would urge you all to respond to those promptly. Now, the audience will remain seated while our witnesses and their aides depart the hearing room. The Capitol Police will ensure this occurs. I want to commend the Capitol Police
I should have been looking.
and our
I should have been-
security staff for running an orderly
I'll look at it right
hearing
now.
today. For the benefit of members, the vote on the floor has been called. We will adjourn this open hearing and we will
Adjourned.
reconvene in closed setting at 12:40 p.m. The hearing is adjourned.
Ooh, 12. What time is it? Okay, so this. Okay. What time is it? Okay. Another one. Uh-oh. Showed the hand. Okay, I need like some fucking All right, guys. 12:56. It's 12:56 right now. So look, we're still in the lunch of it. So excuse me, that's lunchtime. So, you know, when it's lunchtime, 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, that's the briefing time for you to come prepared back to this professional suite, SUITE. Thank you very much. So from the time of 12 to 1, like, you know, I guess there's like a grace period, right?
Once again, good morning, everyone. Without objection, the chair may declare the committee in recess at any time. Before we begin today's hearing, I want to provide a few important reminders. First, today's open portion is being broadcast live on C-SPAN and streamed on the committee's YouTube channel. This open portion of the hearing will be conducted entirely on an unclassified basis. All participants are reminded to refrain from discussing classified or other sensitive information protected from public disclosure. I will adjourn this open session following completion of one round of questions, and we will then move into closed session where such questions can be asked. Second, I want to inform the audience that while I fully support constitutionally protected free speech and the right to assemble, this is not the time or place. Any would-be disruptors in the audience who interfere with the committee's business will not be tolerated. For this event, members will have 5 minutes with witnesses. I would ask each of my colleagues to keep both your questions and complete answers from the witnesses within those allotted 5 minutes. Any last questions that can be answered in time will be submitted for the record. In the same manner in which the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence has conducted itself in recent worldwide threats hearings, I expect that we will continue to act in a bipartisan and respectful manner during today's event. I'm confident all members can treat each of our witnesses today with due respect, consistent with past practice. This worldwide threats hearing provides American people the opportunity to hear directly from our intelligence community leadership on the threats that face our nation. It's my pleasure to welcome our witnesses to today's hearing. Director of National Intelligence, the Honorable Tulsi Gabbard. Director of Central Intelligence Agency, the Honorable John Ratcliffe. Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Honorable Kash Patel. Director of National Security Agency, General Tim Hawk. Director of Defense Intelligence Agency, Lieutenant General Jeffrey Cruz. Thank you all for being here. First, I want to address an issue that was made public earlier this week regarding a group text message exchange that included several members of President Trump's National Security Leadership Team and a journalist. Yesterday, our colleagues on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence held their hearing on the annual threat assessment. Unfortunately, instead of exploring the real and existential threats that face our nation, which is the purpose of this hearing, this issue consumed most of their time. While I will address this topic further in my questions, it's my sincere hope that we use this hearing to discuss the many foreign threats facing our nation. I have deep concerns about the state of our national security. The war between Russia and Ukraine has just surpassed 3 years and now includes North Korean troops on the battlefield. Iran remains the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism, supporting terrorist organizations throughout the Middle East like Hezbollah and Hamas, fueling the latter's war with Israel and Gaza. The threat of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, has metastasized worldwide, expanding a robust military and espionage capability well beyond the Pacific, including here within the Western Hemisphere. The CCP's aggressiveness in operations below the level of armed conflict continues to grow. For example, they have sponsored cyber attacks against the United States critical infrastructure and even recruited a New York State governor's office employee into being an undisclosed agent of the CCP. And after 4 years of a catastrophic open border policy and limited and in many cases no vetting, we have seen an explosion of illegal migrants crossing our border since 2021. In fiscal year 2024, 516 were identified to be known or suspected terrorists, 106 of whom tried to sneak into our country between ports of entry. And these are just the ones we caught of the nearly 3 million encounters recorded by Customs and Border Protection. We've also seen an ISIS-affiliated human smuggling network bringing more than 400 migrants into the United States. And this occurs through networks associated with cartels and gangs from Sinaloa to CJ&G, who present an unacceptable risk to the security of the American people. In the midst of such threats, many have understandably lost trust in the intelligence community. One reason I'm particularly concerned about is the pattern of lapses I've seen in analytic integrity and objectivity in some of the assessments provided by the IC in the last few years. From President Trump-Russia collusion fiasco to the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic to anomalous health incidents, there have been numerous instances of the IC suppressing certain reporting using substandard reporting to support a pre-decided thesis and failure or refusal to consider plausible alternative analyses. That, combined with many other examples of weaponized government, results in a situation where the United States is facing very real threats, while many of our citizens lack trust in those they empower to inform on our counter these threats. Look, I've been honored to serve our country for many years now, first as an explosive ordnance disposal technician in the Army, now as a representative for the 1st District of Arkansas and chairman of this committee. In my time here, I've traveled the world and met with countless IC employees, from everyday Americans doing challenging and often dangerous work of intelligence to agencies directors like yourselves. The vast majority of those people are honest, hardworking, patriotic Americans that silently and without accolades do difficult jobs, often in austere places, sacrificing time with their families and in some cases putting themselves in danger.
Okay, that was a 30-minute raw take. And like showing up, quote unquote, fearlessly, end quote. And I should ditch the quotes, but I'm just like, the rhetoric needs to be transcended respectively, but we still need it. So that's why the respect is there. You know, we're humans, we need to communicate in this verbal language. But you know, the advanced intelligence will tell us to focus on grounding what does Trump really mean, and quote unquote, and how is Stargate AI going to help US, right? You have the best life ever.